Welcome to Democracy Now!, democracynow.org. The Quarantine Report. I'm Amy Goodman. The trial of former Minneapolis police officer Derek Chauvin is entering its third day. Chauvin faces murder and manslaughter charges for killing George Floyd last May by kneeling on his neck for 9 minutes and 29 seconds. On Tuesday, jurors heard chilling testimony from eyewitnesses, including Darnella Frazier, who was just 17 years old when she used her cell phone to film the killing of Floyd. Her image was not broadcast on the court television feed because she was a minor at the time of his death.
When I look at George Floyd, I look at my dad, I look at my brothers, I look at my cousins, my uncles, because they are all black. I have a black father, I have a black brother, I have black friends. And I look at that and I look at how that could have been one of them. It's been nights. I stayed up apologizing and apologizing to George Floyd for not doing more and not physically interacting and not saving his life. But it's like, it's not what I should have done. It's what he should have done. He should have.
That's the answer. Thank you.
Now, 18-year-old Darnella Frazier testifying at the trial of Derek Chauvin, who she says should have saved George Floyd's life. The mixed martial artist Donald Williams, who also witnessed Floyd's death, told prosecutor Matthew Frank he called 911 after seeing Chauvin put Floyd in what Williams had earlier called a blood choke.
At some point, did you make a 911 call?
That is correct. I did call the police on the police.
All right. And why did you do that?
Because I believe I witnessed a murder.
And so you felt a need to call the police?
I felt the need to call the police on the police.
Lawyers for Officer Derek Chauvin attempted to counter the moving accounts by portraying the eyewitnesses to George Floyd's death as being part of an angry mob. But another one of the eyewitnesses was an off-duty firefighter and EMT. Genevieve Hansen told prosecutor Michael Frank she urged the police officers to check George Floyd's pulse as he lay motionless on the ground.
I also offered, in my memory, I offered to walk them through it or told them, if he doesn't have a pulse, you need to start compressions, and that wasn't done either.
Are these things that you wanted to do?
It's what I would have done for anybody.
When you couldn't do that, how did that make you feel?
Totally distressed.
Were you frustrated?
Yes.
Minneapolis fighter fire and EMT Genevieve Hansen broke down in tears as she recalled seeing George Floyd die and being prevented from helping him. Visit democracynow.org to see all of our coverage on the police killing of George Floyd. Brazil is facing a mounting public health and political crisis. On Tuesday, Brazil recorded nearly 3,800 new COVID-19 deaths, its highest daily death toll yet. Meanwhile, the heads of Brazil's Army, Navy, and Air Force all quit in an unprecedented move, a day after Brazil's far-right President Jair Bolsonaro ousted his defense minister as part of a broader cabinet shakeup. The developments have alarmed many in Brazil who believe Bolsonaro, who is a former army captain, will install ultra-loyalists to the military post to consolidate his power ahead of next year's election, when he's expected to be challenged by former President Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva. The U.S. COVID-19 death toll has topped 550,000, by far the highest in the world. The true figure is likely far higher. A new study in the American Journal of Public Health suggests Florida's undercounted the number of COVID deaths by thousands. This comes as Arkansas has become the latest state to lift its statewide mask mandate, ignoring calls by President Biden for states to keep restrictions in place as COVID cases are rising in 26 states. In vaccine news, Pfizer has announced clinical trials show its COVID-19 vaccine is 100% effective for youths between the ages of 12 and 15. Meanwhile, the New York Times has revealed NYU Langone Health, a major hospital system in New York City, has set aside COVID vaccines solely for employees of Bloomberg, which is run by the billionaire former mayor of New York, Mike Bloomberg. The news comes just weeks after Bloomberg Philanthropies gave another part of NYU, that's New York University, a $25 million donation. In international news, Palestinian authorities have received 100,000 vaccine doses from China in a boost to efforts to vaccinate the 3 million Palestinians living in the West Bank. While Israel's vaccinated more than half of its population, it has largely refused to vaccinate Palestinians, except for some who work in Israel or in the illegal settlements. The White House has unveiled a $2 trillion jobs plan to help address the nation's deteriorating infrastructure. It includes over $650 billion for roads, bridges, railways, and ports, over $300 billion for housing infrastructure, $300 billion for domestic manufacturing, and billions for modernizing the electric power grid, expanding broadband, and eliminating lead pipes in drinking water systems. To pay for the plan, President Biden wants to increase the corporate tax rate from 21% to 28%, end federal tax breaks for fossil fuel companies, and crack down on corporate tax avoidance. A grand jury in Texas has indicted 2 former police deputies on second-degree manslaughter charges for killing Javier Ambler, 40-year-old African-American man. Ambler was tasered to death in Austin in March of 2019 after being pulled over for not dimming his headlights for oncoming traffic. As he was dying, Ambler said, quote, "I have congestive heart failure and I can't breathe." Bail has been set at $150,000 for the 2 deputies, James Johnson and Zachary Camden. 2 police officers at the U.S. Capitol who were injured in the January 6th insurrection have sued former President Trump for inciting and directing the right-wing rioters. Meanwhile, Republicans are continuing to embrace backers of the violent insurrection. Videos emerged showing Stuart Rhodes, the founder of the far-right group Oath Keepers, spoke at an official Republican event in Texas March 26th in the border town of Laredo. Other speakers at the event included Texas Republican Party Chairman Allen West. Over a dozen members of the Oath Keepers have been charged with conspiracy for attacking the U.S. Capitol. A warning to our audience, the following story includes graphic description and video of a hate crime. New York police have arrested a man who viciously attacked a 65-year-old Filipino woman near Times Square as she was walking to church on Monday. Video footage shows the man kick the woman in her stomach and then repeatedly stomped on her face while reportedly yelling anti-Asian slurs. The assailant walked away as bystanders, including security guards at a luxury apartment building, did nothing in response. New York mayoral candidate Andrew Yang condemned the attack.
An elderly Asian woman walking the streets of Hell's Kitchen could easily have been my mother, because that's where we live. And so when I saw this video, that is who I thought of. My children actually play in that playground across the street from that apartment building regularly. So seeing this happen in my neighborhood hit very close to home.
U.S. Attorney General Merrick Garland has ordered the Justice Department to conduct a 30-day review of what he called a disturbing trend of hate crimes targeting Asian Americans. In news from Mali, United Nations investigation has determined French warplanes bombed a wedding party in January, killing 19 civilians. The mass killing prompted protests in Mali, where France has deployed 5,000 troops. France rejected the findings of the UN report, claiming all the victims were Islamic militants. The Biden administration's finally allowed some journalists inside a temporary Customs and Border Protection jail in Donna, Texas. Over 4,100 asylum seekers, including 3,400 unaccompanied children, are being held at the site, which has an official capacity of just 250 due to the pandemic. Children were seen crying as they lay on floor mats while being covered by foil blankets. One CBS reporter counted 615 children in a plastic walled pod designed to hold just 32 people during the pandemic. Lawmakers in Washington state have passed a bill banning for-profit prisons and immigrant detention facilities in a move that could result in the eventual shutdown of the Northwest Detention Center in Tacoma, Washington, which is run by the GEO Group. During the pandemic, many asylum seekers imprisoned at Northwest launched several hunger strikes, protesting the squalid and dangerous conditions inside the ICE jail. The bill now heads to Governor Jay Inslee's desk. The New York State legislature has voted to legalize recreational marijuana for adults and to expunge the records of people previously convicted of possession of small amounts of marijuana. Governor Andrew Cuomo has vowed to sign the legislation. Florida Republican Congressmember Matt Gaetz is facing a Department of Justice probe into whether he violated federal sex trafficking laws by having a sexual relationship with a 17-year-old and paying for her to travel with him. Gaetz has denied the reports and claims he's a victim of criminal extortion. The probe grew out of an investigation of one of Gaetz's political allies, Joel Greenberg, who was indicted last year for sex trafficking of a child, among other charges. In 2019, Gaetz and Greenberg visited the White House together. The expose was in the New York Times. And the notorious Republican operative G. Gordon Liddy has died at the age of 90. Liddy spent 4.5 years in jail for his role in the 1972 break-in of the Democratic Party national headquarters at the Watergate complex, which led to the downfall of Richard Nixon. He also once admitted to making plans to kill the investigative journalist Jack Anderson. And Romaine Chip Fitzgerald has died in prison after being locked up for over 51 years in California. He was the youngest imprisoned member of the Black Panther Party. For decades, authorities in California refused to grant him parole even after he had a stroke and was forced to use a wheelchair or walker. Chip Fitzgerald was 71 years old. And those are some of the headlines. This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The Quarantine Report. I'm Amy Goodman in New York, joined by Democracy Now! Co-host Juan Gonzalez in New Brunswick, New Jersey. Hi, Juan.
Hi, Amy, and welcome to all of our listeners and viewers across the country and around the world.